The first time she used my charger, I honestly thought it had to be some kind of misunderstanding. Not because the situation made sense, but because the alternative made even less sense. I walked outside a little after midnight, half awake. Phone still glowing in my hand from the system alert that dragged me out of bed. And there she was, standing in my driveway like nothing about the scene was unusual. Her car was plugged into my charger, the charge light was on, and she was just leaning there waiting like she had every right in the world to be doing it. I remember staring at her for a second, trying to give reality one last chance to explain itself. Then I asked what she was doing. She looked at me and said, completely calm, that I wasn't using it overnight, so she figured it counted as community access. That sentence stuck with me, mostly because it told me I was dealing with a person whose brain worked in a way I probably never fully would understand. Community access. Not my charger, not my system. Not the thing I spent 2 years planning, paying for, building, troubleshooting, until it ran exactly the way I wanted. Community access. She said it like she was talking about a park bench or a public outlet at an airport. And the strange thing is, if she had just knocked on my door and asked me the first time, I might have let her charge once in a while. Not because I owed her anything, but because that's how normal people handle neighbor stuff. They ask, you say yes or no. Everybody moves on. But that's not what happened. She skipped straight past permission and landed in entitlement. I'm an electrical engineer by trade. Most of my career has been in industrial systems, power distribution, controls, backup systems, all the things people don't think about until a building goes dark or a line shuts down. I've never been the loudest guy in a room. I'm not the kind of person who likes arguing just for the sake of it. If anything, I like systems because they make sense. Inputs, outputs, limits, protections. Build something correctly, and it behaves predictably. People are usually the part that breaks the model. When I bought my house, one of the things I liked most about it was how quiet everything felt. It was a normal suburban neighborhood. Nothing fancy. Detached homes, decent yards, driveways, porches. The kind of place where people wave to each other when they happen to make eye contact and otherwise keep moving. That worked for me. My job is already full of enough complexity. At home, I wanted simple. A place I could work on projects, keep to myself, and enjoy the kind of order that only comes from building things carefully. The solar system started as a personal challenge more than anything else. I liked the idea of producing my own power, not because I thought it would make me rich or because I was trying to prove some political point, but because I understood exactly what that kind of independence meant. Over time, the idea got bigger. Then it turned into a plan. Then the plan turned into equipment. Then weekends disappeared. Then evenings disappeared. Before I knew it, I had spent close to 2 years putting together a full private solar setup. Not just a few decorative panels to shave a little off the electric bill. I mean a real system. Panels on the roof, additional collection near the back structure, battery banks in the garage, inverters, transfer controls, monitoring software, everything carefully laid out, tested, and installed one step at a time. It wasn't cheap either. By the time I was done, I had put serious money into it. But it worked beautifully. On good days, it produced more power than I even needed. On bad days, it still gave me more stability than the grid had managed some summers. There's a very particular kind of satisfaction that comes from flipping on a light, or running a tool and knowing the power behind it started as sunlight on your own roof. As part of that setup, I installed an outdoor charging port beside my driveway. It looked like a normal EV charger because, well, that's what it was designed to resemble. Clean housing, proper mount, weather-resistant cable, everything neat and professional. But it was not connected to any public utility line in the way people imagine when they see a charger outside. It was tied directly into my private system. The power coming through it was mine. Generated on my property, stored in my garage, routed through equipment I built and paid for. That detail matters because the whole fight later turned on. Whether some people believe outside means public. The first sign of trouble actually started before the charging issue. A woman who lived a few houses down happened to be the HOA president. That title meant way more to her than it did to anyone else. She had that polished, over-prepared energy of someone who liked having rules attached to her name. Perfect posture, perfectly arranged hair, clipboard sometimes in hand, smile that never quite reached her eyes. The kind of person who could make a conversation about mailbox paint sound like a zoning hearing. Once she took over the HOA, little things started mattering more than they had before. Bin placement, decorative standards, exterior harmony. Most people rolled their eyes and ignored it as long as they could. When my solar panels went up, she noticed right away. One afternoon, she showed up in my driveway looking up at my roof like I'd installed a carnival ride. She pointed out that the panels hadn't been approved by the HOA architectural review process. I told her the city had approved them, the permits had passed, and the installation was fully compliant. She didn't like that answer, but she also didn't have much room to work with. City approval tends to beat neighborhood preference, so she left, but not happily. I could tell from the look she gave the panels that she had mentally filed the whole thing away, under battles lost but not forgotten. For a while, that was all it was. Small tension. Thin smiles. That sense some people give off when they haven't accepted a boundary but haven't figured out how to cross it yet. Then came the first night alert. My monitoring software is set up to scream at me when something abnormal happens. That's part of the point. If voltage draw spikes where it shouldn't, or if an outside load shows up at a strange hour, I know about it fast. So when my phone lit up a little after 2 in the morning with a notification showing an unexpected external draw, I thought something in the system had malfunctioned. Maybe a bad connection, maybe a fault, maybe some piece of equipment outside had gone wrong. I threw on a jacket and stepped out into the driveway, and there was her car. A silver electric SUV parked neatly near the charger. Cable attached, lights softly reflecting under the street lamp. And there she was, standing beside it with the complete calm of someone who believed she was doing something entirely reasonable. I asked what she was doing. She said she figured it wouldn't hurt since I wasn't using it overnight. I asked if she was serious. She said she was only borrowing a little electricity at first. I mean this honestly. I thought she might be embarrassed once I confronted her directly. Not necessarily apologetic, but embarrassed enough to stop. The next morning, I checked the logs more closely just to understand how much power had been used. That was when I realized it hadn't happened. Once it had been happening for weeks, the overnight spikes were all there in clean little rows, one after another. Same general time window, same pattern, same draw profile, same duration. She had not made one impulsive bad decision in the middle of the night. She had built a routine around stealing power from my system, quietly, repeatedly, comfortably. The thing that bothered me most wasn't even the amount, though it added up. What bothered me was the assumption behind it. The casual way she had apparently decided that because the charger existed and was accessible from the driveway, she had a claim to it. So I did what I always do first. I documented everything. I printed out the logs, the timestamps, the power curves, all of it. The reports were clear enough that even someone with no technical background could understand the pattern. Then I walked down to her house and gave her what I thought was a very reasonable chance to stop acting ridiculous. She answered the door dressed like she was on her way to a committee meeting. Not like someone who had been plugging her car into a neighbor's private system at 2 in the morning. I held up the papers and said we needed to talk about the charger. She glanced at them and then at me, with a look that somehow managed to combine annoyance and superiority at the same time. I told her the charger was private and connected to my solar system. She said very calmly that the charger was outside. And in a shared residential community, that created a sort of implied access when it wasn't in use. Stood there for a second because sometimes stupidity arrives dressed so neatly you have to take an extra beat to confirm that's really what it... You're hearing, I told her no. Implied access was not a thing. She shrugged and said I generated excess electricity anyway. I said that didn't matter. She said renewable energy was meant to benefit communities. I said not when it was built, owned, maintained, and paid for by a private homeowner. Then she said the sentence that nearly broke my patience. She said I didn't pay for sunlight. That's when I understood this was not a misunderstanding. It was ideology mixed with entitlement. In her head, the fact that my system produced power from sunlight somehow made it less mine, like the effort, design, equipment, permits, wiring, storage, and maintenance were all irrelevant because the original source happened to be free. I kept my voice steady and told her clearly to stop using it. She gave me that same tight little HOA smile and said, maybe if I didn't want people using it, I shouldn't have installed something that looked like a public charger. Then she closed the door. Even then, I still thought maybe the absurdity of the confrontation would be enough to end it. Surely once someone has been directly confronted with logs, dates, and evidence, they adjust. I was wrong. A few days later, I opened my mailbox and found an HOA violation notice at first. I thought it was going to be about the panels again. Instead, it was somehow dumber. According to the letter, my charging setup represented externally accessible energy infrastructure. My refusal to allow its use could be considered inconsistent with neighborhood resource sharing. I stood there on the sidewalk reading the sentence 3 times because I genuinely wasn't sure whether I was angry or impressed by how ridiculous it was. She had actually tried to turn my private charging port into a neighborhood amenity through pure wording. That was the moment I stopped believing this would resolve through ordinary conversation. I called an old friend of mine who works in electrical design and explained the whole mess. He laughed harder than I expected, then got serious and asked what I wanted to do. I told him I didn't need revenge. I needed the behavior to stop. He mentioned a simple protective approach: reroute the real charger to a secure connection and leave an external unit in place that would reject unauthorized loads hard enough to end the interaction instantly. Not something dangerous, not some movie trap nonsense, but enough to make plugging in without permission turn into a very bad idea. That got my attention. For a day or two, I sat with it. Because once you move from telling someone no to designing a consequence, you're making a choice too. But the longer I thought about it, the more obvious it became that I was not escalating a normal disagreement. I was responding to repeated theft by someone who had already tried to use the HOA to justify it, so I reworked the setup. Real charging connection was rerouted inside the garage where nobody could casually access it. The outside unit stayed in place and looked identical from the driveway. Same housing, same cable, same position. But now it was tied to a protective relay system designed to cut the connection instantly and violently enough to make the lesson unforgettable if somebody ignored clear instructions. I also mounted a bright warning sign above it that said private power system and do not use. Clear enough for anyone acting in good faith. Saturday night. I sat in the garage with the monitoring screen up and waited. Part of me thought she might finally have enough sense to stop. Midnight came and nothing happened. Then 12:15, still nothing. I actually started to feel a little foolish, like maybe I had overbuilt a response to a problem that had already passed. Then, at 12:42, headlights rolled into the driveway. Same car, same woman, same confidence. She got out wearing casual night clothes. Looked around the street once. Walked over to the charger, saw the warning sign. Paused for a second, and then ignored it. That pause really stayed with me, because it meant she had seen the line and consciously stepped over it. She plugged in the monitoring screen. Flashed, the load registered. A few seconds later, the driveway lit up, with a bright electrical crack and a burst of sparks at the connection point. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing out of control. Just one very loud, very clear rejection. She jumped backward and screamed. The cable blackened at the tip, the charging session died instantly, and the vehicle shut down the connection. From where I sat in the garage, it worked exactly the way it was supposed to. The next morning, she hammered on my front door like the place was on fire. When I opened it, she was furious and sleep-deprived, and she had brought 2 HOA board members with her as backup. That was smart in one sense because she knew she wanted witnesses. It was dumb in another because I had spent the night organizing a binder. She accused me of tampering with her vehicle. One of the board members said they were just trying to understand what happened. I stepped inside, grabbed the binder, and came back out. Inside were the charging logs, the timestamps, camera screenshots, usage totals, still frames of her pulling into my driveway, plugging in and leaving. Page after page, night after night. Every bit of it documented. Once the board members started turning pages, the tone changed. The issue stopped being her outrage and became her behavior. One of them asked if she had really been charging from my system repeatedly without permission. She tried to say that wasn't the point. The other one quietly said it kind of was. She kept arguing that the charger had been accessible. I pointed out that accessibility is not the same thing as permission. One of them asked whether the car itself was damaged. I said the charging cable was fried and the vehicle had likely tripped its internal protection systems. But the important part was that she had been repeatedly taking electricity from a private installation. Word stealing ended up hanging in the air whether anyone liked it or not, because that was what it was. Once the evidence was sitting in everyone's hands, the whole community access idea collapsed. Public things don't come with private battery systems, monitoring software, and owner-built infrastructure. Shared things don't get used at 2 a.m. without a word. The HOA board members could see that. More importantly, they could see she knew exactly what she had been doing. After that, the story mostly ended itself. She didn't come back to the charger. The HOA nonsense disappeared. A few weeks later, she stepped down from her position. Officially, it was for personal time reasons. Unofficially, people on the street had heard enough of the story to connect the dots. The decoy charger never had to be used again. I took the setup down eventually because I no longer needed it. What stayed with me most, though, was how preventable the whole thing was. If she had asked me the first time, I probably would have worked something out. Maybe not for free forever, maybe not as some regular neighborhood service, but enough to be decent. Instead, she treated my property like an unclaimed convenience and then acted offended when it defended itself. That's the difference people miss. This was never really about electricity. It was about boundaries. About whether something private stays private when a pushy enough person decides to redefine it. She thought visibility meant availability. She thought outside meant shared. She thought title and effort and ownership all became fuzzy if she could say the words community enough times. She was wrong. And I still think about that whenever. People say neighbor problems should always be handled politely. I agree, right up until polite stops meaning anything. I tried the normal route. I confronted her directly. I documented it. I told her no. She answered with an HOA violation notice and another late-night plug-in. After that, stopped explaining the boundary and enforced it, so I'm curious what you would have done. If your neighbor kept using something private, expensive, and carefully built as though it belonged to the neighborhood just because they could reach it, would you have handled it quietly? Gone straight to legal action? Locked it up and moved on? Or would you have let the system itself teach the lesson the way I did?